Most people assume that having a 7-figure business is crazy and way outside their reach. So instead they aim for the 50 grand a year business.
And then the first 100k month, 500k month, now millions per year. Each step, although they sound huge in and of themselves, they lead to the next as long as you keep continuing.
To build scalable machines from the start, we use campaign types that are relatively hands-off and just allow us to really kind of watch the business grow without having to be so caught up in the detail.
Building a business, you've got to remember we're doing this to create freedom. We're not doing this to build a new job for ourselves or build a new chain.
And it's so good because you do each task once and now it can become a daily task or a weekly or monthly task that just repeats and pops up in someone's Asana profile and says, oh, today you have this task, remember?
And there certainly gets to a point in your business growth where you almost reach a ceiling and you realize that this is the farthest I can take this on my own.
Another amazing milestone was moving to Thailand and Bali and Vietnam and Mexico and like traveling to all these amazing places, running the businesses while I was there and seeing it kind of grow without me physically having to be in the country in which I started. Welcome to the Dropship Unlocked podcast, your key to unlocking the secrets of high-ticket dropshipping. I'm Lewis Smith, founder of Dropship Unlocked, and with me is our client success coach, James Eardley. Now, when we're not recording podcast episodes, we're running our own e-commerce businesses and helping aspiring entrepreneurs launch their own high-ticket dropshipping businesses. So if you're ready to learn how to build your own 6 or even 7-figure business, pick up a copy of my book, The Home Turf Advantage, whether you're looking to replace your income or launch a side hustle. I wrote this book as a roadmap to help you launch a low-maintenance, high-profit e-commerce business that gives you the freedom to spend more time with your family, travel the world, and work on your own terms. Ready to join us? Visit htabook.com to get your copy today. Now sit back, relax, and let's unlock your potential with the Dropship Unlocked podcast.
How would it change your life if you knew how to build and scale a 7-figure e-commerce business? Well, today I'm joined by Lewis Smith, founder of Dropship Unlocked, and somebody who's done just that. We're going to be diving into the exact method that he used and also cover the challenges that he faced on his journey to scaling to 7 figures so that we can discover the 5-step process to running and owning a 7-figure dropshipping business. So, Lewis, I'm sure there'll be a listener out there that's intrigued and likes the idea of owning a 7-figure e-commerce business themselves. Well, what is the first thing that they would need to consider?
Well, the first thing would be having a clear business model, but it goes without saying that you'd also need to put in consistent efforts to reach that 7-figure mark, but it's definitely attainable. There are multiple success stories that serve as proof, including my own. So I think the first thing you need to consider if you want to reach this goal is whether you have the right mindset. So it's easy to write off mindset as something that, I don't need to worry about mindset. I just need the strategies. But really, with anything like this, I think in a sense, you have to be delusionally optimistic. And I say that because you have to almost be, when society thinks one way, you have to think differently. Because if you thought the same as the masses, you would think, well, I would never be able to achieve it. What would make me special and be able to stand out? And I hear this time and time again, speaking to people who are maybe in 9-to-5 jobs who think, why would I be able to achieve this? And I think it comes down to a level of, it's almost like a selective advantage that entrepreneurs have. And you can train yourself to have this. It's not something you're born with. You can learn this skill. But a quote from Tim Ferriss, I think, sums this up really nicely. So really take this one to heart and remember this. He said in one of his blog posts, it's not kind of a famous quote or anything, but he says, it's lonely at the top. 99% of the world is convinced they are incapable of achieving great things. So they aim for the mediocre middle ground. If you let that sink in and think that is like society in a nutshell, most people assume that having a 7-figure business is crazy and way outside their reach. So instead they aim for the 50 grand a year business, right? And therefore it's really competitive at that level. But if you do aim for the top, there aren't that many people who have the guts, the self-belief, the self-confidence to just go for it. And so you find when you reach that point with consistency, I'm not saying it's a walk in the park, of course it's not easy, but if you really push yourself to get there, and you have that mindset, which is the foundation for success in this business, because it will be a rocky road ahead. It will be a bumpy journey. You will have to overcome obstacles. But if you have an unshakable mindset and you're ready to tackle those challenges as and when they're presented to you, you're unstoppable, right? So I think it's just making sure that you know you're competing for the top. Therefore, it won't be that competitive when you get there, because most people will have given up before they even got there because they thought, oh, well, I would never be able to reach that level. So be one of the 1% that says, I could actually get to that level, and just watch what happens. Just watch how you bring it to life.
So I'm not surprised that you've gone straight to mindset as the first step on that path. I think 80% of your business growth is down to the mindset you have, and the other 20% is the tactical things that you pick up along the way.
Yeah, exactly. So building a 7-figure business requires that mindset shift, as most people don't inherently have the belief of, they don't have the internal dialogue of, if others can do it, why can't I? And I think that's something that I take for granted, because that is a belief I have. I see something out there. Like when I first talk about sitting in the grey, dull corporate meeting room and looking out the window and thinking, there are other people running e-commerce businesses out there, and I'm sure they didn't have all the answers when they started. Why couldn't I? And maybe that was something that I learned through reading personal development books. I don't know, but I think that's the thing that carries you through, because when you're tested along the way, you have to have your eyes on the end goal and think, I can get there because other people have got there. So why can't I? They figured out the problems. I'm willing to figure out those problems along the way too, because I know the rewards are worthwhile and will change the course of my life. So it's a worthwhile, couple of years of frustration to get to the point where you have abundance forevermore. So when I was at school, there's a great example of this. My cousin, who's about the same age as me, he just got a guitar for Christmas, right? And I remember going to see him one day, and he played the James Bond theme tune, that like dun 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 dun, and I was like, that is so cool that he's able to do that on the guitar, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, how has he figured out how to play the guitar? That's amazing. Now there's a fork in the road at this point. I could have thought, oh, he's a guitar player, he can play the guitar, that's awesome, good for him. I'd never be able to do that. That's the view of other people can do something I can't. Instead, I took the view of thinking, well, I want to learn to play the guitar as well. So I immersed myself in guitars. I worked in a guitar shop throughout school as like a part-time job on Saturdays and Sundays. I took lessons. I was in a band. I did everything. And then when I got to senior school, because of the work that I'd put in, that foundational hard work and consistency, I was able to fund my social life through senior school by teaching guitar to local children in the area. I'd go around and teach them guitar for an hour and earn 30 quid or something. And so I think the reason I say that is because it's the same with e-commerce. I could have just looked at my cousin and thought, oh, wow, he's special. He can play the guitar. He must have a special talent, like the story you tell yourself about other e-commerce entrepreneurs' ability to achieve something. Or you have that self-confidence and say, I think I could do that. You have that self-belief, that grit, determination, whatever you call it, to say, I'm going to make it. And it's difficult on your own as well, because you have those internal doubts and voices telling you, maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe you did something wrong. Maybe you're not, as good as them. And so I think that's why it's particularly important to surround yourself with a like-minded group of people as well, because as well as having that strong mindset, you need to be surrounded by people. So obviously that's why we've created Dropship Unlocked as well. And then alongside that, as well as having a strong mindset, there are of course some tactical considerations which we'll dive into in this episode. So really the foundations being, you need to set yourself up from the start to ensure that you have a scalable operation. So things like registering a limited company, having a separate business bank account set up, having standard operating procedures like step-by-step task breakdowns for all of the processes in your business. Things like that are of course important, as well as just having the right mindset.
That's right. And all of those tactical things that you need to grow and scale a 7-figure business can all come after you've got the mindset in place. And it sounds like from those guitar lessons, those guitar days when you were growing up, that mindset was instilled in you from the start, that when you see somebody that's achieved some level of success, you don't write off the fact that you could ever do it. Instead, you just realize that he must have just learnt it. He's got, it's a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. And this talk about mindset, it reminds me of a study they did on the most successful self-made millionaires. And they looked at what are the most important traits that they have and the common traits among them all. And it was this brilliant paradox where the one trait was that they had was this hole within them that needed to be filled. They needed to achieve success. So they needed it. It was like a desperation. And then the other side of it, another trait they had was that they also had this belief, this, like you say, this delusional belief that they were absolutely going to get there. And having those two, the need to win and also the belief, and having both of those, that's going to set you up for success. So I'm glad we've touched on the mindset straight away, but also as well as the mindset, we need to make sure that we set up our foundations correctly if we're going to grow a business that has the potential to become a 7-figure business in the end. So Lewis, how would you go about setting up foundations for a business that you could scale to 7 figures?
Yeah, so one of the first things you'd need to consider is what you're going to sell, which products you're going to sell. So product selection being one of the key foundational decisions for this type of business. So you've got to choose products, of course, that are in demand, that have a good profit margin. You've got to think about market trends. You don't want to be in something that's spiking in terms of trending and maybe it's now on the way down and suddenly your business just kind of fizzles out. You want to see competition in the market. Most people shy away from it and think, oh, I found this amazing niche that's got no competition. I'm like, well, do you want to be the person that figures out why it has no competition? Or do you just want to go where the money already is and seek out competition so that you know there's a proven demand? So those are just a few of the 9+ criteria that we walk people through inside the Dropship Unlock program. Other things include like your average product price, making sure that you have a high enough price point per sale. If you want a lifestyle business, you don't want to be selling trinkets where you make £5-10 profit per item. Ideally, when you make a sale, you want to be earning £100 profit minimum per sale. Then you only need a few sales per day and you've made a good income. Yeah, so it's just taking time to complete that niche research, going through the 9 different criteria that we walk our members through step by step, tailored this to setting this up if you're in the UK as well. So it's called our home turf advantage model. Now, say you wanted to learn about business, for example, just to kind of put this in context, because I think people get confused about why they wouldn't just pick a product that they were pretty sure would do well. Imagine you had a school project, you wanted to learn about business, and you thought, okay, going to learn about business, I'm going to go to the library and I'll get one book, right? So you get that one book that's like Dummy's Guide to Business or something, and you think, I'm going to read that. That's my ticket to success to this project. Now, imagine how limited you are knowing that book's probably out of date. It's written by one person. It's, a single source of information. You don't have any other context to add to it. You're going to be very limited. Compare that to saying, okay, now I'm going to go to the internet and, go on the Kindle library, and there's thousands of books at my disposal, or YouTube, or online programs or whatever, to source the information from thousands of people specific to the type of business you want to know about. You can see the difference there. You can ignore the noise and keep what you see as the best information and just leave the rest of it behind. So imagine you only had one book, how limited your chances would have been to reach the success in business that you wanted to, or complete that project, right? So it's kind of like people who pick a product because they're passionate about it, or they're kind of blind to the alternatives and they think, I'm pretty sure this is going to work. I did some surface level research. I've got some friends who are into this stuff. I think it's going to be good. That's the equivalent of going to the library and saying, I'm going to pin all my hopes on one book and hope it has the information I need to make it a success. Instead, we have a whole world of books at our disposal, and that's our product selection methodology. We use the data to guide us to proven, in-demand, sustainable niches that have an abundance of UK suppliers who are ready and willing to sell high-profit products, so products that make upwards of £100 profit per sale, and who are willing to dropship those products directly to your customers with next-day delivery, right?
And then when you get products that you can deliver within next day, you're going to have so many less impatient customers getting in touch with you, and everything down the line, there'll be less products to sell because you've got high ticket products. And all of these decisions you make up front when you put the foundations in place is all because you know the end result. You know that you want to get to a business that's a lifestyle business in the end.
Exactly. Yeah. So you asked about foundations as well as product selection. The other foundations are what tools you use. We're in e-commerce. It's a technological industry. So choosing robust e-commerce tools, we use things like Shopify and Google Workspace. That can really set you up for success from the outset, because there are, of course, we get people all the time saying, but there's a cheaper option. I could use WooCommerce, or I could use Wix, or I could use BigCommerce, or whatever. There are definitely some cheaper options out there, but some of them haven't been upgraded in years. Like, they are literally left the same, because there's not the support team around it. They're not innovating. So it's a bit like buying an old iPhone. Do you remember the iPhone 3GS? I think that was the first iPhone I ever got. And it was like, well, of course, if I still had it, it'd probably still work. I could probably still make a phone call, send a text on it. But every single year when Apple release their updated iPhone video, it always gets me, and I always end up going and buying the new iPhone. And so now I know that there'll always be an improvement. I'm kind of like, well, I'll just go with Apple because I know that they innovate for me and I'll always have the latest thing at my disposal. It's the same with our business. Why would we pin our hopes to an old iPhone 3GS and be like, well, it does the job. Do you want it to do the job, or do you want to be at the forefront of innovation? And with Google and Shopify, I mean, they speak for themselves, those companies, right? That they are always at the forefront of everything they're doing. They're always innovating. So by using those tools, we keep our businesses at the forefront of the field we're in.
And that's a good frame to approach when you're looking at the tools that you want to use to build a business. And I think a lot of the time, people want to get to these high numbers, like a 7-figure business, but then they look at the tools that they need to get there, and they're looking at the cheaper alternatives, or they're looking to see how they can save £20, £30 here or there per month. And if you're looking at that, how can you expect to receive those really high numbers if you're not able to invest in yourself and invest in the tools that are really going to get you to that next level? I think that was the mindset shift I had when I first started in e-commerce, was going after the tools that I knew were absolutely the best in class, instead of just going for a cheaper alternative, which would get me lower results.
That's a really good point. And put it this way, would you rather invest the extra £15 per month in Shopify versus a cheaper platform if it made you just one extra sale at £2,000 with a £600 net profit? It pays for itself for several years over, I imagine. I haven't done the maths in my head there, but you see what I mean? Like, one extra sale makes it worthwhile for years, literally. So it's like, well, of course you'd go for the best in class option, wouldn't you? When you're dealing with higher profit products like this, that it's going to pay for itself in no time. So I think, it's very short-sighted to think that you can, cut corners and say, what do they say? You're stepping over £5 notes to pick up pounds. So focus on the end result, focus on making the sale and the higher profit margins. Don't focus on saving pennies on the tools to get there. Go with the best tools you can.
Exactly. And now I know I need to go for the best tools, and you get what you pay for, essentially. And if you want to set something up that's going to be long-term, and it's going to be a sustainable income stream that can replace your salary, you need to realize that there's going to be an investment in the best tools out there when you get started. So wanted to drive that point home. But in terms of starting, we've already touched on sort of the end in mind. We've discussed that even though you're making decisions in the short term, for right now, what are you going to start with? What tools are you going to use? We always need to have the end in mind. I think that's really important to consider the lifestyle business that you want to run, or wherever you start with an e-commerce business in the first place. Keep that in mind while you make those early decisions. And touching on that, on an early decision that you need to make, is the importance of the marketing campaign that you use. I know you touched on it many times about the importance of marketing in driving traffic and sales to your business. So how would you say, in your process to building a 7-figure business, how does somebody go about setting up a profitable marketing campaign?
Yeah, there's a whole strategy we use around business. We call it the 30,000-foot marketing campaign or marketing strategy, which we kind of go through in our program. But in a nutshell, we find that the search intent traffic, so people who are looking for a product to buy, they're searching, where do I buy, Outback Barbecue UK? Those are the types of searches that we know will convert at a higher rate than someone who's on Facebook scrolling through cat memes and then suddenly sees a photo of a barbecue for sale, right? It's going to be much easier to convert the first person to purchase than it is the second, because you have to distract them, pull them off the platform, show them why they might want a barbecue, convince them to then buy it. Like, there's a lot of heavy lifting to do from a marketing perspective with that second scenario. So Google Ads are the primary marketing channel that we use for, call it cold traffic, but it's not really cold, right? It's relatively warm in that they know already what they want to buy, but they're cold in the sense of it's the first time they're approaching our business, so they're cold to us. We do use meta ads for retargeting mainly. So if somebody has viewed a product on our website, then we can follow them around the internet, around Instagram, around Facebook, using meta retargeting, dynamic product ads, things like that. And even email campaigns as well, using Klaviyo to retarget them and send out specific custom, like abandoned cart flows and nurture email sequences, trying to win them back and bring them into our business. But yeah, to build scalable machines from the start, we use campaign types that are relatively hands-off and just allow us to really kind of watch the business grow without having to be so caught up in the detail. So a particularly good campaign at this moment in time, is the Performance Max campaign type in Google. It's a fantastic kind of all-in-one campaign, works really well. We always used to shy away from these like overly simplified automated campaigns in Google. They always used to make it kind of so simple, you don't need to do anything. And then they're more than happy to take all your money when it doesn't work. But actually, we see these Performance Max campaigns outperforming the smart shopping campaigns that we used to run. And so we're kind of leaning into that automation now and seeing it work well. So yeah, it's kind of got that dynamic retargeting built into it as well. There's an argument at the moment being made by some in the field that it is heavily weighted towards retargeting. And actually, it does kind of cannibalize a little bit of that retargeting, and it's not so great at bringing in cold traffic. But you kind of have to take the Pareto principle and say, well, if you want 80% of the results, go with the option that is going to be the least hassle, right? So it's a bit like a few years ago, I started buying a brand of shoes called Vivo barefoot shoes. Don't know if you've heard of them, but they're like, these thin-soled barefoot shoes that are supposed to be good for your feet for running. They're like good for your feet and your knees, stops you from heels striking into the ground. And recently, after a couple of years of using them and running most days, I found the pair had a hole in, right? So I went onto my phone, looked up Vivo barefoot shoes, didn't buy any because I got distracted by one of my children probably. And then for the next few days, what do you think I see all around the internet, right? It's the same pair of shoes again and again and again. And there's that, like, don't know what they call it. It's like that recency bias where you assume that the thing that is most prevalent in your mind, you give it a higher level of importance. So when I came to make the purchasing decision yesterday, I didn't even consider going to a different website and looking for another pair of shoes. I'd already decided because I kept seeing the brand around the internet. It's a brand that I knew well. So I just went with it. So price wasn't even a consideration because of this type of marketing. So we can use that. We can get our products in front of people again and again and again so that when they come to make that purchasing decision, they're not thinking, oh, I'll go and buy that barbecue, but I'll just buy it cheaper elsewhere. They're just like, well, this is a brand I've seen everywhere. I saw them on the news website. I saw them on this blog the other day. I see them on Facebook every day. Of course they see us because we're running remarketing ads. But in their mind, we're just like, it's like us being on the news every day, or like having an advert on TV every day. It's just a different platform. So it's incredible that we can do this. And yeah, I purchased a pair of the shoes yesterday. And so it's the same that works on our customers every single day.
Well, it works, clearly. You can have your own first-hand experience of being retargeted and making a purchase. So clearly it works. I think for a lot of people listening, it sounds very foreign, or it sounds like the type of marketing that only really big companies can do, to be able to follow you around the internet everywhere you go. When you go to Facebook, you see them again. But actually, it doesn't take long to learn how to implement this myself with Google Ads and Meta Ads. Even small businesses getting started and startups have that ability to follow somebody around the internet everywhere. So it's good to see that you picked up on that quickly. What were the other sort of tactics that you used?
Yeah, one of the other nice ones you can use, which doesn't actually cost you anything in terms of you're not spending anything. Of course, you pay for the software. But is sending out emails as well. So if you have an opt-in box, like some kind of pop-up on your website that captures people's email addresses when they opt in, you can then use a tool like Klaviyo, which is an email marketing autoresponder tool designed specifically for e-commerce stores, to send people personalized emails that show them the products that they were looking at when they were on your store, right? So imagine an email that says like, hey, we thought you might like these items, and then you have a dynamically inserted code that is taken from the code that you had on your website that tracked what they were looking at, and then inserts the photos of and the prices of those products into the email. And they're like, that's amazing. Yes, I was just looking at that. And I'm sure we've all been targeted by these things, but this is the mechanism behind why it works, and it's why you get targeted with them as a consumer, is because they work. So why not now benefit from it by being a retailer that uses the mechanisms, rather than just sending a generic email blast to your customers that's like, no, you might like these products, but I'm not really sure. Give them a super hyper personalized email that is specific to the products they looked at, and it's a better all-round experience, right? So I think it's just, email is a great one for that. Another thing is with the old way we used to run ads, we used to use the smart shopping campaigns. And even before that, we used to just use standard shopping campaigns. And we used to have to alter the keywords and the bids like that were in there. You couldn't add keywords, but you could add negative keywords. So there was this like reverse funnel approach. And every day you'd export all of your search terms, go in, add your negatives to the correct kind of campaign structure and have all your priorities set up. And if one slipped through, you'd get a load of junk traffic coming. It was a nightmare, and it became almost like a full-time job. I felt like I was running a media buying agency, just trying to manage our own ad campaigns. Very time-consuming, not a lifestyle business. And so when they released these like machine learning AI campaign types like Performance Max, I thought, wow, that's really good. And that's what I mean. You might be able to squeeze slightly more juice out of it if you went with the manual approach, but at what cost? you lose all your time then. So this is the 80-20 principle. Go with the 80% that gets you the majority of the results. And the other thing with those campaign types that you want to make sure you're doing as well is of course, tracking your return on ad spend meticulously, really, really watching that as you start to scale up your marketing campaigns and kind of reach that point of like profitable equilibrium, where it would become unprofitable for you to spend any more to acquire customers, but any less, and like there's money being left on the table, right? So you will reach that point where your conversion rate kind of balances out, and you realize, I can continue to acquire customers profitably at this cost per acquisition. I'm happy with that. It works with my margins. And it's like, okay, let's focus on something else now. The marketing kind of is like set up. So it's really nice once it's up and running.
That's right. And then you've got a lifestyle business that runs ads without you. It generates sales without you. I mean, we've got thousands of ads running now while we're recording this podcast that's working for us, that are bringing traffic to our websites and generating sales while we can record podcasts or do whatever else we choose to do. So clearly the campaigns that we set up is the lifeblood of our business. It's what's going to generate traffic and sales for us. And according to HubSpot, it's an interesting fact I picked up recently, is companies that prioritize marketing efforts are actually 13 times more likely to see a positive return on investment. So clearly a well-executed marketing campaign can help in identifying the right target audience, improving brand awareness and increasing sales, leading to a significant growth and scaling of the business. So by putting marketing as one of your top priorities and something that you do as a business owner and eventually outsource, and that's going to get you so much more returns and a much more positive return on your advertising investment. So now we've got to a point, Lewis, where we've got a business up and running. We've got the campaign is thriving. You're generating sales every day. I want to talk about now scaling to that next level, having that really strong belief that we can get to 7 figures. What do we need to do in order to scale our operations efficiently?
Well, to scale my own operations, I had to implement more automation into the processes and also bring on board the right team. You could only do so much on your own before you start to burn out. And I've definitely reached that stage a few too many times now. So knowing what I know now, hopefully I can save a few people along the way from really like burning the candle at both ends until you reach burnout. So yeah, bringing on board the right people, managing that team effectively, but also using automation where you can and really leaning into the new automation and AI capabilities rather than kind of shying away from them. And that's something that we'll talk a bit more about as well, kind of the ethos that I try to get our team to use when it comes to AI and using that and embracing it. But as soon as your net profit from your business covers the cost of bringing on board a virtual assistant, as a contractor for your business, ideally you want to be in a position where you would be able to comfortably afford to hire at least 2 of them, because then that that there's very little pressure, and you might actually want to do that. You might want to say, I'll hire one person for phone calls and live chat from UK 9 to 5 hours, and then the other person could work from the other overnight, which in their time zone would work out probably at quite a reasonable time. So I think that's one of the key things, being able to do that, because then you can look to outsource some of the day-to-day operations. And they say you want to get yourself away from working in your business so that you can start working on your business, right? And that takes a little while for some people to realize this. Everyone says it, but then sometimes they find themselves still doing it, and you need like an external party to say, hey, why are you doing that, when that could just be trained and passed along to a VA so that you could focus on the stuff that only you can do, or maybe the stuff that you want to do, rather than the nitty gritty, like answering live chat, support tickets, things like that. So one of the websites that we look to hire talent from is a website called onlinejobs.ph, which is a really cost-effective job hiring platform based primarily in the Philippines. And yeah, they help you manage your virtual assistant in a very effective way. So what we do is kind of write a job spec, making it very clear what's expected of them, and kind of create a job post to hire for the position. Then we go through a round of interviews. Then there are lots of kind of strategies to this. It's something we go through in week 6 of our program, but we make it very clear on, once we do hire them, what the expectations are in terms of the tasks. So you want to make sure that you don't rush into just hiring someone who's not the right fit. Don't let them kind of join if you're not comfortable that they're going to be the right cultural fit for your company. You need them to buy into your kind of company mission, your values, you as a person as well, and make sure that they feel supported as well. These are people that you need to support. What you're paying them is allowing them to feed their family and to live. So you have a responsibility as well of bringing on the right person who feels secure in that position. And a few of the tools that you can use to manage a virtual assistant when you do bring one on board are things like Trello, for example, or Hubstaff, or even tools like Asana. So when I first hired a virtual assistant, one of the ladies on my team, I was kind of giving her all of these instructions. I felt really sorry for her because I was like sending her messages on Slack just with like, oh, and when a customer says this, do this. Oh, and if it's this supplier, do this. And if it's like, and I was just bombarding her with instructions. There was no like structure to it. And I was thinking, gosh, if I was in her position, I'd feel really overwhelmed by this. There's no kind of centralized hub of where these instructions need to be. So I started organizing these into standard operating procedures. So just lists of instructions step by step. So it would be like, if a customer says this, here's a template response you can send to them. If they say this, then this is how you deal with it. Here's the link to the folder where you put, instruct, like whatever. And that way you can list out the steps in Asana, provide them with even like a video of you going through the task once. And eventually you've got a whole library of these SOPs, as they call them. And you can assign kind of groups of SOPs. So anything related to customer payments and refunds, anything related to customer support and questions, anything related to, supplier queries, things like that. And you can give individual team members on your team access to these like groups of instructions. And it's so good because you do each task once, and now it can become a daily task or a weekly or monthly task that just repeats and pops up in someone's Asana profile and says, oh, today you have this task. Remember, here's a video from Lewis on how to do it. Here are the steps you need to do it. And I never then have to do that task again. It's done, and somebody who we hire has a really simple, straightforward process that they can just follow. They don't have to like think about, how do I do it? What if it changes? Because if it does, I'll just go in and update the steps. So that's the benefit with SOPs. The other thing is automate what you can. Don't make someone do it just because you can make them do it. If it could be done by a computer, then figure out a way to automate it. Use tools like Zapier, so that because much of this doesn't even need human involvement, that way you can have the humans on your team do things that only humans can do, right? Really well. So that way you're not making people do like mindlessly repetitive tasks just for the sake of it because you can be bothered to figure out how to automate it, right? There is a responsibility on you as well to improve somebody's enjoyment of their work by automating what you can.
Absolutely. Automate what you can and then outsource what you can't. And I think building a business, you've got to remember we're doing this to create freedom. We're not doing this to build a new job for ourselves or build a new chain to be tied to. So I think you can get carried away. If you're the type of person that likes to do and implement and work on things every day, it's easy to just not outsource and just say, I'll do it, because it's easier for you just to do these little tasks throughout the day instead of go through the effort of working out the process that you follow and outsourcing for somebody else to do that. But I know certainly the times where I've felt stressed or closest to burnout is when I've been trying to take on too much, and it gets to a point where I'm fighting fires and I can't keep up with the workload, and I need to get better sometimes at outsourcing. So these are sort of challenges I've had. I know you mentioned earlier that you got close to burnout at certain times, but what are the sorts of challenges that you've faced as you've been scaling your business?
I think as a business owner, you start to you realize that you have to focus on taking a holistic view of your team's capacity, like who's close to breaking point in terms of like who has too much on their plate and maybe who doesn't have enough, so that they're a bit bored and they're twiddling their thumbs and they're looking for more projects, so that you're not overwhelming anyone on your team. Everyone feels challenged and is enjoying the process and the journey. And one of the ways you do this is give people ownership of projects and allow them to really take ownership of it and see it through to completion before you then move on to the next task. Because then that gives that person a sense of satisfaction and ownership, and they got to see it through. But also it means that you're not overwhelming them with like, oh, here's the next one as well. And oh, can you half do this? And then I'll take it over. Like, let them see it through. Let them get the satisfaction of actually bringing it to fruition. And if at any point your team say, oh, I've got a lot on my plate, as a manager, it's your responsibility to speak to your team and figure out who has what on their plate and help them prioritize. Because, you might have on your team a web developer who's working on a certain project, a graphic designer who's working on design elements. You've got maybe a salesperson who's always on the phone trying to make sales. You've got virtual assistants who are doing customer support, things like that. You want to help them prioritize the things, because only you as the business owner have that vantage point of seeing everything across all of the different areas of your business. So what they think might be top priority for you, you know, oh, actually this thing's even higher priority. This should be the thing we're all kind of focused on at the moment. And that's, I think, a skill that you acquire over time as a manager and a leader. The other thing is remove yourself as the bottleneck for growth. You know, so get out the way of your team. If you're the reason why they can't grow and you're there the preventing the company from being able to grow, and that's what you want to do, and you can see that the opportunity is there, figure out what's the way that you remove yourself as the bottleneck. So empowering your team to make decisions without you, and have them come to you after they've made decisions up to a certain cost value maybe, and then just review them afterwards. You can always just tweak them and say, I wouldn't have authorized that, so in next time could you not do that? But that's fine. A few mistakes here and there are better than having everything run past you and the whole team waiting on you for things to happen. That will really slow down your innovation as a company. There'll also be a stage where you get to where you think, I need to now bring in the experts who are better in their fields than I am in those fields. Because if you just hire people who you want to teach how to do the job, you will always be limited by what your abilities are capped out at. Whereas now I would hire specialists who literally, like, some of the people on our team now are so incredibly specialized and talented in what they do. I don't even know what they're doing, like, half the time in terms of, like, I don't know how they're doing it. I know what the project aim is, but some of the, like, automation, AI, web development ninjas that we have on our team now that are creating some incredible, like, behind the scenes automations. I'm like, well, that's what you've specialized in, and that is why I hired you, because you're amazing at that. But I don't need to learn all the steps of it, because I'd limit myself if I was, like, so focused on one thing. It's great to see it happen, but yeah, I think you've got to just let them get on with it. And the other thing that I mentioned before is harnessing AI. So artificial intelligence is here. It's not going anywhere. As we all know, it's growing every day, and it's incredibly valuable. And I think we've got to learn to embrace it in business, because it's here to stay. The way I've positioned it to my team, we had a team meeting the other day, and we were talking about, we want to be at the forefront of AI. We want to lean into it. We want to make sure that we're using it to our advantage. You know, so whether that's using it to boost your conversion rates, having your web developers use new tools that help boost your product page or website conversion rates, or improve your sales copy with things like ChatGPT, or boost your marketing campaigns with some of, like, Code Interpreter, uploading your analytics into there and figuring out optimizations you could make, or just improving, you know, the overall user experience, or bolstering your sales and outreach. Like, there are so many different avenues when you bring in people who are more talented than yourself. And if you can then give them the permission to say, let's use these new tools to our advantage and not shy away from them, and not take that approach of, like, the robots are here to take over, you know, humans are all redundant, and let's harness it and make the most of it. That's the kind of leader that I aspire to be. You know, I'm not the implementer that's doing. I'm the person I'm the enabler. I'm trying to bring in the best people, get out their way, and let them do the work that I brought them in to do.
And there certainly gets to a point in your business growth where you almost reach a ceiling, and you realize that this is the farthest I can take this on my own, and you get to a bit of a plateau. And it's only when you can then outsource and bring people in with expertise well above and beyond your own, is when you can really get to the next level. And I'm glad you touched on the point of AI. It's such a great opportunity for us now coming into business in this age, that we can now outsource work to AI that we used to have to do ourselves. The amount of leverage we can get out of AI now, instead of necessarily outsourcing in the first place, is huge. I think an opportunity for everyone listening to have a think about. So we've touched on some of the challenges, but what about the celebrations? So when you've hit those milestones along your journey to building a 7-figure business?
Yeah, of course. There were some great milestones along the way. I think some of the ones that stand out are, like, when you hire your first VA. That's a great moment. Hiring your first VA is incredible, because you think, I'm out of the business. Like, I can finally breathe. I can get, you know, somebody in to do the customer support. I don't have to do it. And it's incredible. And ultimately, I probably hired the wrong person initially. They've no longer with us, but they took advantage. They were a little bit unreliable, and, you know, but that was on me, right? I'm blaming myself for that. I should have been more stringent on my hiring criteria. I take full responsibility for it. I should have laid out the company values, mission, put them through, you know, more interview more of a robust interview process to really filter out the type of person I wanted to bring into the business and entrust with my business. But yeah, I think things that I've learned since then are like challenges with cash flow. You know, the UK VAT and cash flow management stuff that I've talked about before, that could cause some major problems. We kind of got into the habit of like initially thinking, oh, we'll just decrease our prices and then we'll soak up a load more sales in our market. And obviously you then see sales rocket because you're the cheapest in the market, and you think this is great, but you're looking at like revenue as a vanity metric and thinking, wow, our sales are going through the roof. And then you start to realize, hang on a second, after we paid our VAT and our ad spend's really high because we're not monitoring that correctly, you realize actually our margins become really tight. And then once you've paid everyone in your team, it starts to be like, we're not even making a profit here, we're losing money. And if you scale that up fast enough and high enough, you can quickly go out of business. And that nearly did cost me my business at one point, until I really quickly realized I need to get a grasp on the profit margins. I don't need to be the cheapest in the market. As we talked about earlier with the Vivo barefoot shoes, it's not about price always. It's about value. It's about being present in the customer's mind and figuring out my target return on ad spend and making sure my campaigns are set up correctly, and just having a profitable equilibrium that I like to reach now and attain in an e-commerce business, which is a level that I'm really happy with, where we make consistent profit and doing it that way. Another amazing milestone was moving to Thailand and Bali and Vietnam and Mexico, and like traveling to all these amazing places, running the businesses while I was there and seeing it kind of grow without me physically having to be in the country in which I started the businesses in, which was incredible. It is amazing, but it can be quite isolated and lonely at times as well, because when you're on a journey like that on your own and you're on the other side of the planet, you crave those kind of like-minded people and that community who are on the same path as you, because you want people to be able to ask questions of or get advice from, or even just share wins with. And the other thing is reaching your first £100,000 in sales. So that's really cool when you see the Shopify kind of revenue tracker go from 99 to 100,000. Then obviously your first £500,000 is awesome. And then eventually your first £1 million is amazing to see. And then your first £1 million in a single year is great to see as well. And obviously now we're just under £5 million in revenue, which is amazing. So I think, just seeing those metrics, those numbers are great. Outsourcing everything, getting to the point where you free up your time for other projects. And of course, for me, one of those projects, which we now talk about, is growing a new business, Dropship Unlocked, which is a totally different beast of a business, but it's one that I really enjoy running too. It's very rewarding, as it's what I knew was missing from the market. So, a UK specific program and community. So I built it, and now we're one of the top rated e-commerce education companies in the UK according to Trustpilot, so it's in a good place too.
Amazing. Some awesome milestones along the journey, and at each point I can also see how anyone like myself can achieve those steps. Although you're at the position you're at now with running a 7-figure business, each step, and like hiring the first VA, just when you've got the first £1,000 net profit a month when you can hire a VA, that's a very achievable early on. And then the first 100k month, 500k month, now millions per year. Each step, although they sound huge in and of themselves, they lead to the next, as long as you keep continuously improving and growing and improving wherever you can. So great to hear about the milestones that you've been through, Lewis. Definitely inspirational for me, and I hope somebody else out there listening as well. So what I wanted to dig in, you touched on some financial challenges that you have when you were growing the business initially. Clearly, financial management is a skill and a critical aspect of growing any business, especially an e-commerce business as well is no different. So how should an aspiring 7-figure entrepreneur handle their finances?
Yeah, I think once you start making sales and you've got transactions going in, going out, things are happening, money's moving, there comes a point where you'll want to hire a good accountant early on and have them using tools like Xero or QuickBooks or bookkeeping software to keep track of your finances. Have them in a separate business bank account. Make sure everything's set up for scale from the beginning, just like we talked about at the beginning of the episode. And also have your own profit and loss tracking sheet that you or your virtual assistant can update daily, so you know your exact health of your business. We provide a template UK bookkeeping and profit tracking template for dropshipping that I had specifically built for our members of the Dropship Unlocked Masterclass. I think the other thing is focus on your return on ad spend metric as well inside your Google ads campaigns, your meta ads campaigns, and making sure that you're really keeping a close eye on that number. And of course, your profit margins as well. You can negotiate with suppliers. Don't get into what I did and try and think that it's a good idea to get into a race to the bottom on profit margins. Nobody wins, especially not you, if you end up making no profit on each sale. So make sure you're retaining your margin. We like to see between 20 to 30% profit margin. So if you're making a sale at 2,000, a net profit of £600 would be a really good place to be. And that can happen multiple times per day as well. So the percentage margins might be a bit lower than some other industries, but because the value of the sale is so much higher, your overall cash profit is really healthy, right? So that's the concept of the home turf advantage. And then, just making sure that as you have that cash coming into the business, you're not irresponsible with it. You're reinvesting your profits. You're solidifying your operations. You're bringing in the right people. You're not overspending, and keep a cash buffer. I like to have 6 months of cash there available, liquid in the business, so that if anything were to happen, I'm covered. And that's possibly more conservative than a lot of people, but maybe a lot of people haven't come close to losing their business. So maybe my risk tolerance has dropped in that sense because I'm hypersensitive to it, right?
Right. There's no doubt that would have had an effect on your approach to risk nowadays, but it means you've been able to continue growing and scaling for the long term. I think some really good tips there about financial management, which is so important for every business owner. So for anyone listening now that is intrigued and likes the idea of building and scaling their own 7-figure e-commerce business, what do you think would be the first step on the ladder for them to take?
Yeah, well, I mean, to summarize kind of the points we've talked about, believe that it's achievable and get clear on your goals and the reason why it's important to you. Have that can-do attitude of, hey, I've seen someone else do it, therefore I can figure it out too. I don't have the answers yet, but I have the mindset that I'm willing to go and figure them out. Then once you have that in place, the rest is kind of just process, right? So it's having the solid foundations in place, choosing a niche, going through our criteria, making sure your niche is data backed and you're not just relying on the single Dummy's Guide to Business book from the library, but instead you're using the entire internet. You've got all of the information at your disposal to pick a niche that you know is data backed and will work. Find suppliers, so suppliers offering next day delivery, who are willing to dropship already, who are proven, who sell products where you can make upwards of £200-300 in profit per sale, and just setting up your online store in a professional, slick, user-friendly way using the right tools, so Shopify in the case of our discussion today. The other thing I think is, like I said, don't work on a desert island. Don't be the lone ranger that's kind of trekking through the jungle trying to figure everything out on your own. Surround yourself with like-minded people on the same journey as you. And if you want a proven system that teaches you how to build a dropshipping business capable of generating multiple 7 figures, pick up a copy of my book, The Home Turf Advantage. You can get that at htabook.com. And I think that will really help you get set up from zero right up to getting up and running. Just a quick heads up, if you'd like to share your questions, stories, successes, or challenges, you can email us directly at podcast@dropshipunlocked.com. And you never know, we might even feature you on the next podcast episode.
Also, if you want access to today's show notes or any of the resources we've mentioned in the episode today, then head over to dropshipunlocked.com/podcast. We also have a small favour to ask of you. If you enjoyed the show so far, if you could take a minute to leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice.
You wouldn't believe how much your reviews help us grow the podcast. We'll even read out some of our favourites on the next episode. So if you want to be featured on the show, please do go ahead and leave us a review today. Thanks so much for your support. We really couldn't do it without you, and we absolutely love hearing what you think of the podcast.
Now let's answer a question in from a listener. Remember, if you want your question answered on the podcast, all you need to do is email us. It's podcast@dropshipunlocked.com. And that's exactly what Edward has done. He emailed his question. So Edward's question for you today, Lewis, is: when outsourcing your business and moving to a different country, how do you manage the business in a different time zone? And also, how does this work when you have virtual assistants that are also in a different time zone? So who would do the day-to-day tasks like capturing payments when you receive orders in the day while your virtual assistants are presumably in bed?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question, Edward. So firstly, I'll try to explain how it works when your virtual assistant lives somewhere with a different time zone to your customers. Then I'll talk about how I'd run the business while I'm abroad, because I think they're two separate things, right? You could be in the UK and have a virtual assistant in the Philippines, and the first question would still apply, right? So the first thing is your store's opening times you can dictate. So if you want to hire someone who's available between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. UK typical working hours, like a brick and mortar shop would probably be open that time range, you would advertise that on onlinejobs.ph as saying this job is for UK time zone 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then when you advertise that, you will only get people applying in the Philippines who are willing to work those hours. So for somebody in the Philippines, that would be from 4 p.m. in the afternoon for them through to midnight. Okay, that's the time that they have chosen to work. They're happy with that, and therefore they would only apply if that was if there's someone who does like working into the evening, right? But remember that then frees them up for their entire day. So that might work really well for somebody who has young children, for example, or for somebody who has things they need to get done in the day. They can come home and just work in the evening. So it works really nicely for them as well. And obviously, remember, they don't have to commute. They can work from home from a laptop. So it can work really, really well. So that's the part about that. Remember, it doesn't have to be 9 to 5 UK hours, because you could hire two virtual assistants, one who works UK working hours and the other who works, the inverse, like overnight in the UK. So you end up with 24 hours support, and there's like a bit of a handoff between your two virtual assistants. So I've seen that work as well. The other part of your question, Edward, while I'm abroad, I work at times that suit my day, and then I make sure that any time sensitive tasks, like if I have to answer any phone calls or do any live chats, things like that, those things are all handled by my virtual assistants who are working in the UK 9 to 5 hours, right? So they capture payments by 9 a.m., for example, or when they first log in. I'll have a standard operating procedure that says to them, first thing you do is check the orders from the day before, go through, capture payments, fulfill all orders so they can all be sent out with the next day. So we say next day delivery. It's next day from the moment that we fulfill it. We can't expect a supplier to be doing it next day and read our minds. If they haven't received the order yet, then that's a different thing. You can automate that though. So we talked earlier in this episode about it doesn't have to be a virtual assistant job that fulfills the orders. You could have something that automatically sends the email straight out to your supplier if the order comes through at midnight, so that the second your VA starts work, they know the order is being sent out straight away, right? And so they didn't even have to send the email. So there are ways of even taking the human involvement out of this. But hopefully that gives you a bit of a picture. Like once you're abroad and you've set everything up, you work at the hours that suit you. And it's quite nice in Thailand, for example. I used to get hours of work done before the UK would even wake up. So I get loads of work done, no emails coming in, manage kind of what was happening in the team. And then as soon as the virtual assistant started work, I'd kind of check in, have a little handover and be like, good, over to you. I'm off to, enjoy the day. My day of work is done now in the morning hours that I batched that work into. So hopefully that helps, Edward, and clarifies the answer to your question.
Awesome. Thanks, Lewis. I know you mentioned to me that it was a bit of a hack of yours when you were working and living abroad, because you could work before anyone else woke up and there was no distractions coming in of live chats, of emails or anything. And so it actually works out in your benefit. So thanks for sharing that. Hopefully that's tidied things up for you there, Edward. Thanks again for the support that you've shown for the podcast, Edward. And we're also going to highlight another listener who has shown their support for the podcast. And this is a review that was left by Nick on one of our recent Spotify episodes. And Nick said, fantastic listening to Lewis and James talking about their personal stories and how they built their businesses. Very inspiring.
Amazing, Nick, and thank you so much for your very kind review. We'll continue to release these podcast episodes, and we hope you'll continue to enjoy our stories. If you want to show your support for the podcast, it's very simple. The best way for us to gauge whether our content is hitting the mark is through your reviews on your favorite podcast platform. Or if you're a fan of YouTube, leave us a comment on the video version of this podcast, and you might just hear your words featured next time. Why not share this episode with someone you know? Your journey into e-commerce, especially as we've delved into the world of 7-figure dropshipping today, might inspire a friend or a family member. Sharing this podcast could spark that crucial conversation about building and scaling an online business to new heights.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast. We hope you found the discussion both inspiring and entertaining.
If you're ready to begin your own high-ticket dropshipping journey, then here's what to do next. I've taken all of the years of my own experience, both in running my e-commerce businesses and teaching hundreds of others how to do the same, and I've condensed it all into my book, The Home Turf Advantage. It's your comprehensive guide designed to help you create your own e-commerce business. And you can grab your copy today at htabook.com.
Stay connected by subscribing to the podcast. This way you'll never miss an episode packed with valuable insights. And if you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review. Your feedback motivates us and we love sharing our favourite reviews on future episodes.
And thank you for deciding to spend your time with us today. We really appreciate you and we look forward to sharing more high-ticket dropshipping insights with you on our next episode of the Dropship Unlocked podcast.